bad is the picture in the UK when it comes to BAME representation in boardrooms and in the C-suite?
Good morning, Nera. A pleasure to be here. Sadly to say, it's not very different from the US. When you look at a Parker review was published in January this year, and I spoke on that, and we were teetering, and the Parker review set at least one BAME person on a FTSE 100 board by 2021. We were teetering about the 60-something, about 67, 69%. I think those figures have moved. But when you distill that down to Black representation on boards, it's even less. And this is looking at a BAME population of 13% of the UK population and a Black population of 3% of UK population. These are startling figures, and something more needs to be done.
Yeah, and Nneka, do you get a sense that the Black Lives Matter protests this time have really resonated with the business community in the UK? Do you get a sense from the people that you speak to that things might actually start to change now?
Well, I hope so. I hope so, because this has transcended race. I mean, we have seen the protests out there, and we have seen white people, Black people. This is no longer about just all lives matters, but this is shining the light on the social inequalities and the racial injustices of Black people have had to suffer. So big tech companies, it's heartening to see that big tech companies have come out with big and bold statements talking about denouncing race, and some have even gone further to implement policy changes. But we need to do more, and this cannot be the perfunctory platitudes that we have seen come in the past. This is post-COVID. If we are to grow as a nation, we need to tap into that 3% and that 13%. Overlay that on any company's balance sheet. 3% top line, your revenue, or bottom line, your net profit growth is not to be sniffed at. These are things, we are hemorrhaging talent, and we need to do something about that. So we need to begin to have those conversations that are arguably profoundly uncomfortable, but we need to get past feeling uncomfortable and get to a position. It's uncomfortable for me as well, so it's uncomfortable for everybody. That is collective. But we need to begin to have those conversations and then get to the nub of the issue, the problem statement, and begin to solve those problems with affirmative, sustainable action.
Since you sort of mentioned affirmative action there, Nneka, I want to ask, because one conversation that is starting in the UK, we already are measuring a gender pay gap. Should we be measuring a race pay gap?
I would say yes, because you can't measure what you can't see. And for now, at the higher echelons and the top levels of tech companies, I come from a tech background, so I'll talk about tech companies, Black representation is almost non-existent. I happen to be one of the first Black women to sit at the ExCom board level of a multinational tech company. Things haven't changed since then. So we need to be able to have those discussions, understand what the problem statements, the problems are within companies, and then begin to put in career progression. So even recruitment at all rungs of the career ladder. So put in place broadening the net to recruit at all rungs, and then to retain, measure, and then hold those boards accountable by reporting on progress. Yeah. So if we're looking at the gender pay gap, we can do the same thing for not just the BAME, but the Black community, because the issues are very different. We have had racial inequality, and we need to begin to address that. And we need to address that in a constructive manner. You know, we're willing to have those conversations, and let's come together for the greater good of society. This surely cannot be bad.
Yeah. No, and Nneka, you were talking there about a couple of things, one of which is that you need to measure and then you need to account for the steps that are taken. So what actually needs to be done concretely at the recruitment level to ensure that it is a diverse recruiting process?
Okay, I'll borrow your phrase, concretely. And I'll give you an example of how you can act without knowing, baking in the unconscious biases or sometimes conscious biases into your recruitment process can exclude a whole part of the population. A friend of mine sent me a role for a non-exec role, and she says, we've been scratching our hair, and I thought about you, and I said, yes, Nneka ticks all these boxes. She sent me this role, and I looked, tick, 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 and it came to the last one, and it talked about something arbitrary, about having policy experience, or it had FTSE 100 experience. We know there are no executive directors, black executive directors in the FTSE 100. That immediately discounted me. And if that happens at all levels of recruitment, whereby you are inadvertently baking in exclusion criteria, you are then hemorrhaging talent. And there's an argument for saying that, well, when you're not so prescriptive, then you begin to dilute or lower the quality. I argue differently. You are actually opening up to a richer and more diverse talent population. I mean, that surely must be right.